Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to create a view using MVC. So I'm going to create a new project. It'll be an ASP.NET web application. I'm going to call it MVC Views Demo. And we'll make it an empty MVC project. And we'll start off by adding a controller. And we'll make an empty MVC controller. I'm going to make it the home controller. And just to see what happens, we're going to run it. And we see it's looking for a view. And by convention, MVC is going to assume that you're going to place the view in one of a number of places, either in the same directory as the name of the controller, in this case home, or in the shared directory. And since we haven't created a view yet, obviously it can't find it. And you'll notice that our view could be either ASPX, ASCX, or CSHTML or VBHTML. ASPX and ASCX use your basic web form development approach. CSHTML and VBHTML use Razor code. So we're going to be creating our views using Razor code, and since we want to use C#, we're going to use CSHTML documents to create our view. So the next thing is to create a view. And the easiest way to create a view is to right-click on your action result and select Add View. And for now, we're going to deselect Use Layout Page and click Add. And what you'll notice is that a index.cshtml page is made here underneath Home. If we look at our home controller, this view that the action result returns by convention will be placed in a directory which will be underneath the views directory, will be a directory name based on the name of the controller, in this case home controller, so it just removes the word controller to make this directory. And then the view name will be based on the action result, so index for this one. So this will return this view. And just so that we can tell that which one we're looking at, we're going to add a header element called View Page Demo, and let's see what we get when we hit Control F5. And in fact, when it goes to the home and index, it now returns this view. So just to review, the home controller, based on our route config, it takes the page it's going to return is going to be the controller slash the action method. In this case, it would be the home controller and this view. Since we went to home and index, it's going to return the index action result. the index action result is going to return the view which corresponds to views, home, and index. And that's returning our view page demo. Another thing we can do is we can pass data to our view, and the view data is basically a dictionary object which we can store key value pairs. In this case, we're going to store So we're going to store this string, my really cool value, as the value associated with my really cool key. And then in our view, let's change that so that we can view it. And we can use the @ symbol, and that will evaluate the statement that we have next, which is my really cool key. And the way you can think about it is the @ symbol says we're no longer writing in HTML, we are now writing in C# code. And please evaluate the statement, view data, my really cool key. It will take the value that we placed into it in the controller and return it here between these paragraph tags. And we can see that this value that we placed inside of that our view data object was in fact rendered in our HTML page. So my really cool value is placed into view data under this key. And then it was displayed using Razor code inside of the HTML of this form. Another way we can do this is, rather than using view data, there is an object called the view bag, where instead of passing in identifying the key as an index value, we can treat it as a property. So this will dynamically create my really cool key as a property and associate it with the view bag object. And it still works. So although we're placing this now into view bag basically abstracts away the process of putting that into view data. And so it's essentially the same thing. It's just that it gives us makes it syntactically nice to be able to just treat it as a property. And of course, in here we could, rather than saying view data, we could say view bag dot my really cool key. And of course, that should work as well. And it does. So you can either use view data or use the view bag. They both work the same as a way of passing data that you want displayed by your view from the controller to the view. And the nice thing about this structure is we are really kind of separating out the role of the data and the view. The data is not embedded in this view. we're passing it through this this intermediary object, and view is just displaying it. The other nice thing about ViewBag is that your value will retain the type that's set into it. So if you were to put in a number, or if you were to put in an integer or a float, when you wouldn't have to cast it back to its original type when you used it in the view. Otherwise, you have to with the view data object, it really stores a list of objects. With ViewBag, it stores items that are of the type that were set into them. So ViewBag is a little bit more convenient in that you don't have to cast, you don't have to pack and unpack items. So let's make a little bit of a change here in our in the top of our index.cshtml. I'm going to create a variable called name. And whenever you see these asterisks inside of, or these @ symbols inside of CSHTML documents, what it's really saying is switch from HTML mode to C# mode. So, and that's what Razor is. Razor is essentially just C# code, but you just add an @ symbol so that it switches from HTML to C# mode. So this basically says use C# to render, to evaluate this expression that's following. And we're going to change this so that it says and see, right now I'm writing in HTML code. As soon as I hit the @ symbol, now we are in C# code, and it's going to evaluate name. And of course, I set name up here within some other Razor code. If I run this in, we can see that it does in fact work. Our school mascot is Saul the Sun Cat. And let's say what I want to do was then put a parentheses in here and say see him. And we can already see kind of what's going to be a problem here. And so what I wanted was to show name and then have this in parentheses come out after it. And when I run this, we can see we get a compilation error. And that's because the way this is written with the @ symbol, Razor goes to C# mode, and it reads name and assumes that once it sees the parentheses that it's looking for a function called name and then passing in some values. And obviously this is not adequate syntax. So there's a couple ways we could fix this. I could potentially fix it with a space. And there you can see that it works. Other ways that you could fix it, if you wanted that, for some reason, that parentheses to be right next to it, you can add a text tag around that element. And you can see then I can have the parentheses right after it if that's what I wanted for some reason. And if I view page source, you can see that text tag shows up and basically just allows this to be rendered without treating it as part of the Razor code. And the logic that Razor uses is essentially this. When it sees an @ symbol, it says now I'm in C# mode. When it sees an opening tag marker, the $n sign here, then it goes back into HTML mode. The other time it goes back into HTML mode is, say, with the space. And so you can pick either method to fix this kind of a problem. It doesn't happen very often, but on occasion you may need to throw in a text tag to make Razor switch back to HTML mode. We can also use we can use a C# to create a list. So for example, I'm going to move this back to just being a space. I think it looks better. And then let's create an unordered list. So here I'm just using normal HTML. And the nice thing about Razor is we can switch back to C# mode. And then just use C# essentially to do a repetition for us. And so we're going to for each through the name, and then we're going to display each character on a separate list item. And you can see how we're switching to C#. Then when we come back down here now, it'll be in C# mode from here all the way to just before the HTML tag. Then it'll be in HTML mode. Then we switch back to C#, which displays a C, then back into HTML. It can figure out with this closing curly brace that that's the close of the C# code. And so Razor figures this out for you, and all you have to do to write Razor is basically just put an @ symbol and write some C#. And here we see that it created a list with each character of the name as an element. And if I view page source, you can see that it basically just built our HTML for us with code. So that we can use the view bag to pass information to a view and have it display it. But there's also a more sophisticated way of passing in information, and that's using a model. So view bag basically just sends a dictionary object to view. But we can also add a model to a view, and all a model is just a class. So if I right-click on models and add a class, let's create one for some contacts. And so I'm going to make this contact class, and we're just going to have a bunch of auto properties. And I'm just going to use, if you type, of course, prop tab, it'll allow you to quickly create some auto properties. So there we have a contact class now in our models that we can use to store a contact. And then in my controller, I'm going to create a new action controller. And we're going to create a new contact. Make sure this is saved. And you'll notice that it doesn't find it right away. That's because our contact is underneath models. And the way we can fix that is adding a using directive. Using MVC View models. And by adding that using directive, it adds this namespace for models. And then it can find your class that you created. And we'll just use an object initializer and set the ID equal to 1, the name equal to Yarny Strustrip, set an email, and a phone. And actually what we want to do is say var contacts. Let's make several of them. So we'll say var contacts equals a new list of contact. And I have a number of these already built, so to save time, I'm just going to paste them in. And so we have this list of contacts that we're creating. Now, we're creating this one just for demo purposes, but you might actually be using database code to get that list. And we're going to return a view, and we have another overload of this view method where we can actually pass in an object. In this case, we're going to pass in this list object that we created. And again, we're going to right-click on the method and add a view. And we're going to leave these defaults in. And we're going to add using... We're going to add a using directive, just like we did in the other class, so that we can actually see this namespace when we write code. And we're going to also add a reference to model. Oh, and don't forget to make your class public. And so we're going to set a model as an IEnumerable of contact. Now, list objects implement the IEnumerable interface, so this should work. And in the body of our view, we're going to create an unordered list, and we're going to just, using Razor code, i.e. C#, we're going to for each through each item in the model, and display the contact dot name, a dash. Note that when we hit that space, it went back into HTML mode, and now we're going back into C# mode so we can pick up the email, back into HTML for the dash, and then back into C# code to get the phone number. And then, of course, when it hits this tag, it'll be back into HTML mode. And we can see we have a nice unordered list showing the names, the emails, and the phone numbers. So this is really your model view controller pattern. You create a model of the data you want to display. Usually a very simple class with some auto properties will do fine. And then in your home controller, you instantiate a list object of those class items, and you just pass that IEnumerable object to the view through the parameter, and then inside of your view, you can just use that object just like it was any other object inside of your view. So this shows how we use MVC, and it helps us by creating a separation of concerns between the controller, the model, and the view. The view's job is basically just to take a model and display it. The controller's job is to get a model and pass it to the view. And the model's job is just to hold the data that we want to be shown in the view. And now this is a very simple use of MVC. You can actually, there's a number of patterns you can use. And for example, there's the model view model approach, which allows us to actually combine multiple models together. And so if you look up view model in MVC, it'll show you a way of creating a more complex view. This is a post on Stack Overflow for what a view model is. And so I highly recommend looking up view model and reading some of the more complex approaches to creating your models for your view. But if all you have is just basically a simple table, then usually all you need is just a class, wrap it up into a list object, pass it to the view, and then in the view, for each through that collection to see each of the items. So another thing that would be nice to have is a template for all of your views to follow. And we can do that with something called a layout. So to create a layout, what we'll do is, if you look at this view, we see that layout is set equal to null. And let's go back to the home controller and add another action result method. And we're going to call this layout page demo. And we're just going to return a view. And note what we have currently in our solution explorer. And for our views, we have home, and then that's pretty much it. And we're going to right click and add a view. But we're also going to click here and say use a layout page. And we're going to leave this empty so it creates a default layout page, and we'll add it. You'll notice that we get the scaffolding indicator, and what that's basically telling us is it's writing code for us. And now you can see that we have, in addition to what we had before, we also have the shared folder with this layout.cshtml. We also see that Bootstrap is now in here in this content folder. And the layout page that was created we notice that we also have this file called viewstart.cshtml. This is basically code that is added to every CSHTML page. So this will be combined with your other CSHTML page, which means that all of your pages from here on out will, by default, have the layout set to views shared layout.cshtml. And if we look at this shared layout page, we can see that it has the head block for the code, the body, and a method that says render body, and some default code that was made for us. This HTML action link is basically a link page. And this will be a link to the home page. Notice that there's also a reference to ViewBag title. So if you set the title in ViewBag, it'll display it here. And let's run this. And we'll go to layout page demo. Forgot the home controller. And there's the application name. That's a link that'll bring us to the home page. And then it just has defaults. So essentially, we have a page that's that puts a lot of the default layout page, kind of sets things up to look like a fairly modern application. And we see where the layout page demo title was set and where the code for layout H2 tags with layout page demo was placed. And let's change this up a little bit. We're going to take the body and change this code to be a little bit simpler, perhaps. And we'll put in a header block. we'll set up an action link, which will go to home index with so the link text will say home, but this will go to the index method of the home controller. And another HTML action link. Which will go to the pass a model method in the home controller. After the nav, we're going to add a div and render body, which really means take the view that's being passed in and display it here. And maybe a footer element that we'll just say Views Demo. And a script tag. So we get our bootstrap. Well, one for jQuery, one for Bootstrap. In our layout page, we're going to add a paragraph tag here, and just so we can see where the content would show up. And you can see now, if I look at my layout, we have, here's the title, which is the header block from the layout page. We then have the nav here with our two link items showing here and here. And then we have the layout page demo, which is everything here is being rendered through this render body method, which basically takes the HTML from the actual view and displays it where it says render body. And notice that we don't have all the normal tags you have in HTML. When you're using a layout page, the layout page will take care of the head tags and everything else that you would have in a page, and then all we need in the view that we pass to it for the content is just the items that we need in the content, and that's what shows up here: layout page demo and h2 tags. And if I view source, you can in fact see there's that code right there. That's where the content was generated in this render body tag or render body call. So that's basically, and that would be the normal way that we would be building a page. You would have a model, you create a action method inside of your controller, which would pass that model to the view. You would typically be using the layout, and so your view would have a reference to the view, typically done through the view start. So this, you can actually have this code. If I didn't have this here, I could place it in the actual page itself, and it works the same. But because almost every page is going to have that, it makes more sense typically to have it in the view start. So all views will execute the code in the view start. And then the view will just be a content page, essentially, that defines what you want to display that's different from what would normally be in the layout page. And the layout page just has all the elements that would be common. Typically a navigation area, and with some links to allow you to go back to the home page and other pages. Another thing we can do is use sections. So I'm going to go to the home controller and I'm going to add another action result method. Called section demo. And it's just going to return a view at this stage. And then in our layout, we're going to say at render section, page header. We're going to set required equal to false. We're going to add a view. And we're going to use the default layout page. And we'll have the main content here. And then we're going to add a section called page header. And see what happens. And what you notice is that with a section, you can basically set up the layout so that there's a definition for rendering a section, and then in your page you can set it. If I don't have that, it doesn't display it. If I do have it, it will display it.